Welcome back to this special edition of This Week in Space. The Constellation Nation is not a happy place this week. After 6 years of work, $9 billion spent, it is to all be scrapped. And people who support Constellation say the alternatives will not be nearly as safe. One of the leading voices in this regard is a former NASA astronaut, former NASA manager, and a former executive at ATK, Doc Horowitz. Doc Horowitz, thanks for being with us on this special edition of This Week in Space. The Obama administration is going all in on these small private commercial entities, a different kind of relationship between NASA and its contractors in this case. In essence, they'd be buying a ticket on a commercial ride. That's good news if you want to think about a commercial space business, but you're concerned about safety. Tell us about that.
Oh, absolutely, Miles. Quite frankly, the commercial world isn't really ready to be selling tickets to NASA for astronauts to go to space. This is akin to a quote I heard that we're like in the 1920s. Lindbergh hasn't crossed the Atlantic, and these guys are selling us 747s. It's not to say that they're bad. It's not to say they don't believe in safety. It's just they need some time to demonstrate and to learn all the lessons required.
Well, let me ask you this, though. We've been in the space business now for 50 years, give or take. Those lessons are not imparted over to the likes of SpaceX and Elon Musk?
Well, some of those lessons are. We write down a lot of those lessons, but a lot of, when you work on large programs, comes from experience. One of the things we were seeing in Constellation for the first time in about 40 years, NASA engineers, scientists, and their contractors were all getting a chance to design and develop a spacecraft to send people back to orbit. We haven't built a new spacecraft since we designed the shuttle in the 70s and first flew it in 1981. So everyone needs to learn how to do this again.
So you're skeptical that the private sector can do this, but these are not people, these are smart people who are involved in all these projects, and surely they can avail themselves of this expertise that you speak of, right?
Right. I mean, given enough time, they'll learn how to do this. So the reason COTS was formulated the way it was to allow these people to move very rapidly without a lot of government oversight and a lot of interference, to be quite frank. And they're starting to learn. We've seen companies starting to launch rockets, and they're building their new ones. But we haven't seen a demonstration yet to show that this experiment is going to work.
Having said that, though, and I realize that SpaceX has missed a lot of deadlines and there's a lot of questions that remain, there also are a lot of questions that remain about Ares 1, for example. That particular project is behind schedule and underfunded. So in that sense, is it worth sticking with that particular design and that ride to orbit?
Well, you know, a lot of people are quick to say things like you just did, that it's behind schedule and underfunded. Well, if you're underfunded, you're going to be behind schedule. One leads to the other. And in fact, the Office of Management Budget, OMB, in its submits over the years, has taken in the first part of this program at least 12 to 20 billion out of the Constellation budget. And that's why you don't see Ares 1 ready to go fly yet. We originally were going to fly it in 2012, and the primary reason it's been delayed is purely because of budget cuts.
So do you think that the private sector, the commercial ventures that we've been talking about, can they do it any faster?
Right now, even the Augustine Commission said it was going to take them some time. I've seen estimates anywhere from 5 to 7 years to be up and running. I'll give one small example of what has to be accomplished. You have to have a launch abort system to have a safe ride for astronauts to orbit. I have yet to see any details of anybody's launch abort system design, and that particular element probably is more complicated than anything else on the rocket. It has to do everything a rocket does, except it does it in a few seconds. You don't know the starting.
And I did talk to Elon Musk about this. He said it's probably a 2 or 3 year project just to get that together. So that in and of itself implies that this is not going to happen anytime soon, is it?
Right. I would say if everything were perfect and nothing went wrong, which doesn't happen in this business, the quickest anybody could have field a capability to launch humans to space would be 3 to 5 years. Now, having said that, the rockets that are out there, ELVs, Launch rocket, Orbital's rocket, people have to remember these rockets are in the 10 metric ton class. Ares is in the 25 metric ton class. So right now, NASA is designing and building a vehicle that's 2.5 times as large, probably at least 5 times as safe, and given the money, could be flying within a few years.
Well, taking aside for a moment the specifics of who's getting the contracts, let's talk philosophically for a moment. Do you think it's appropriate for NASA to be not as focused on low Earth orbit and looking toward farther destinations?
Absolutely. In fact, that's the way the Constellation program was envisioned and why we did COTS. The idea was NASA would always do the next harder thing. And Ares 1 and Ares 5 and Orion are designed to get out of low Earth orbit. They're not designed to go service low Earth orbit. Once you get to space, you're in low Earth orbit, so you can use it as a backup for that. But the idea has always been to get the commercial guys going and buy the services from them as soon as they prove they can do it. And then get out of low Earth orbit for NASA and move on to the next destination. Stay one step ahead and spin the technology back into the commercial sector and let them develop it and sell it as soon as they can, because that should save us money.
Well, that seems like a good plan, and that's what the Obama administration says it's doing. Are they doing it wrong, in your opinion?
Well, they're not doing that because they've zeroed out all of NASA's capabilities. So NASA has no capability, and the only capability it's going to have is to buy it from the commercial guys, and until they deliver, we have nothing. So they've kind of killed the NASA's doing the next harder thing part of the equation.
Depending on who you talk to, if you talk to the people on the commercial side of this, they say this is the dawn of a new exciting era. The people who are invested one way or another in Constellation would tell you this is the beginning of a death march toward the end of U.S. space exploration for human beings. Where do you fall on that?
Well, the answer is always somewhere in the middle in the argument. And what I say is that we need to develop the commercial guys because we're going to need to be able to buy those services. But this is like the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. We've been to this movie before, Miles. The history of the human spaceflight program at NASA is littered with programs that depended on technology. Commercial is going to solve our problem. And I point to things like orbital spaceplane, OSP, ROV, reusable launch vehicle, X-33, all of these programs that promised us, to use technology, and NASA would concentrate on that, and then we'll just buy rides on rockets. And they've never worked before, and it won't work again. What you need is a balanced approach. You need clear needs, goals, and objectives. You need a well-managed program, and the way Constellation and COTS were originally envisioned is the right answer. NASA does the hard stuff, spins it off to the commercial guys. As soon as they can do it and make money at it, we buy it from them and move on to the next thing. That's the proper approach to the future.
Doc Horowitz, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Miles.
And what does a man who's actually walked on the moon think about NASA deciding not to return to it? We checked in with Buzz Aldrin at his home in Los Angeles.
I'm not sure that I really see government-managed activities as being the epitome for how we ought to do everything. The government should pioneer things like exploration.
Buzz Aldrin, always a pleasure talking to him. Amid all this uncertainty, another shuttle crew is getting ready to strap themselves in and head up to the International Space Station aboard Endeavour. And we plan some special coverage for you on spaceflightnow.com, of course. Launch is scheduled for 4:39 a.m. Eastern Time, Super Bowl Sunday. Our launch coverage, the streaming webcast on spaceflightnow.com, begins at midnight or 0500 GMT. I'll be joined by David Waters and Leroy Chiao, as always, and numerous other guests. Thanks for being with me on this special edition of This Week in Space.